Hello, everybody. Hey, there we are. This is the Fireside chat. As you can see, we've got the Yule log going. It's the closest thing I think we could get without getting some fire marshals involved. Anyway, my name is Robert RSnake Hansen. I'm the Vice President of Labs at White Hat Security. And a lot of people ask me what that is. Basically, I build all the stuff that doesn't really have a home anywhere else, or no one can figure out how to build or whatever, so I go off and build it. Some examples are like Aviator and some internal stuff that you'll probably never see, never hit the light of day, and so on. But on the Black Hat Advisory Board, I used to run hackers.org, or I guess I still technically do, wrote some books, and I break the web all the time. So, let's just get into it. How about that? So, I want to talk a little bit about how bad guys find websites. And I think it's possibly evolving very, very rapidly. So, let's talk about how they used to find websites. So once upon a time, let's say I wanted to scan the entire internet looking for vulnerable websites of a particular vulnerability that I knew about or something. It could take, anywhere from months to even a year or more when I first started off on the internet, because processing time was, not particularly good, bandwidth was bad. The ecosystem was kind of really spread out. We didn't really understand the whole RFC thing, and scanning things like 10 dot was not particularly effective, and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, it took sometimes what we would call like an endless amount of scanning, where effectively by the time you were done scanning, you kind of had to start the whole process over again and rescan the internet, because the internet has changed significantly in, let's say, in the last year or whatever. So now, due to a change in the Linux kernel last year, you can now scan the entire internet on a single port with about 4 machines, 100 megabits each, and you can do it in about 4 minutes. 4 minutes. So that has changed what the landscape looks like from a threat perspective very significantly, or at a minimum, it's about to. And the only reason it hasn't is just because the attackers haven't really figured it out. So TCP and UDP on IPv4 is effectively probed. You hiding something on a high port or something, that does not work anymore. It never really worked, but now it definitely doesn't work. IPv6 is a whole different ballgame. You still are technically safe in there as long as they can't figure out approximately where you are. But that whole obfuscation based on you hiding on the internet with ports does not work. So let me talk a little bit about the technology. So once upon a time, I wrote a tool called Fierce, which does DNS enumeration. Also finds non-contiguous IP space. So let's say you had a target. You'd scan for that target using Fierce. Then you turn Nmap loose on the results of that, and you would get a listing of all the open ports of your target. Now you have stuff, because that change in Linux kernel I was talking about, like Zmap and masscan. And these don't require all that nonsense. I can just scan the whole internet. I don't need to do anything funky like figure out what your IP space is. I'll just figure out all of the IP space on the entire internet. It's actually just more efficient to do it that way. This particular screenshot is actually taken from a botnet that was scanning the entire internet, probably maybe as much as once a minute it was scanning the entire internet. And it was able to detect changes, basically servers going up and down on the internet based on Hurricane Sandy coming through and kind of wiping out the city. So as damage assessments, if you're in a wartime situation and there's bombs blowing up, you can actually detect that that particular target has been taken down by virtue of you not being able to ping that particular IP address or set of IP addresses or whatever. So they were able to watch it turning on and off basically as it was happening. Which is pretty amazing. So I'll talk more about that in a bit. So I know that sounds bad, but it's actually much, much worse than that. I know. No one's ever said I'm a bearer of good news. So why is pre-computing better than fast scans? So fast scans, I can scan the entire internet, like I said, in 4 minutes for a single IP address, or a single port rather, scan the entire internet, get all that data back. But that's actually kind of slow. If I actually scanned the internet, let's say last week, because doing it all the time is pretty obnoxious. If I did it like last week, I can shove it into a database. And if I have it in a database, I can do lookups effectively in real time. I can say, find me all of the open ports that are vulnerable to whatever I'm talking about, some application or something that I'm exploitable or whatever. Show me all the results now. And so I can get the results back in seconds. Not minutes, seconds. And the internet does change, and in a week it will change a little bit. but not significantly enough that you won't get a huge target list as long as it's a fairly dense vulnerability or whatever we're talking about. And the nice part is it's effectively no false positives because the internet doesn't change that quickly. So we're going to start seeing a lot more of that. We're going to start seeing people starting to use this stuff, and I have a lot of evidence of it. So there's some people working on this already. University of Michigan in conjunction with Rapid7. Is there any Rapid7 employees here? No? Oh, that's too bad. Shout out to those guys. They're doing really, really cool stuff. If you run into Trey Ford, tell them their stuff they're doing is very, very important to all of us, by the way. Right now they're doing several different types of scans. This is actually not a complete list. They're doing HTTP ecosystem scans, things like Heartbleed and stuff, figuring out which servers are vulnerable. Reverse and also forward DNS, that's actually a new thing. Service fingerprints, port 80, just basically crawling the entire internet. So that's actually really cool stuff. Barely what I need. There's some other really cool stuff that they could be doing that they're hopefully going to be doing in the not too distant future, but it's definitely going. Also, Mubix. You guys familiar with Mubix? You guys know him? Awesome, good. He's a cool guy. He's running a reverse DNS scan of the entire internet right now. It was temporarily offline. I'm not sure if he brought it back online. And I think the reason it was offline is because he ran out of hard drive space. So the other one that's pretty cool right now is unicorn.net. It's basically an HTTPS Heartbleed scanner. Where he's basically charging around like a half a Bitcoin or something for any result that you want of a target list. So you say, here's the IP address or a set of IP addresses that I'm interested in. He'll tell you if he's got information about it, and he'll give you a little snippet. And then you pay some amount of money, and you can get the entire Heartbleed dump without actually doing the attack yourself. Why is that bad? Well, for the obvious reason that now I know vulnerable lists, and I can go attack individual targets I'm interested in. But also, from a forensics perspective, this is a total nightmare. So imagine I have a Heartbleed vulnerability, and then I close it, right? So a month later or something, somebody attacks me, and the very first attack, the very first attempt they make, they compromise something that's really esoteric on my site. I'm like, how the hell did they do that? It must have been an insider. They must have somehow compromised my vendor who wrote the code. Like, there's got to be something else going on there. But that's not what happened. What happened is they got this old Heartbleed data, went through, crawled it, found like old cookie data. They found a directory that was supposed to be hidden that isn't, some source code that might have SQL injection or command injection in it that's unique. So that minor information leak can be used way in the future, even though you think you've patched the vulnerability. If there are any vulnerabilities that were disclosed during that Heartbleed, which is a great way to uncover all kinds of stuff in the file system, they can effectively use that against you. And so just in a few minutes of testing, I think I was able to compromise about 40 different machines just using Heartbleed data from Unicorn without even paying for it, which is pretty crazy. The other one is the Internet Census Project. This is actually, no one knows who did this apparently. It is by Anonymous. Anonymous hacked into 1.2 million routers, and he was using that to scan the entire internet, which is pretty cool. And I like this botnet because he used one of 3 passwords, default passwords like admin, password, and 123456 or something. And he was able to hack into 1.2 million routers, which said another way is 1.2 million networks. See? And with 1.2 million networks at your disposal, usually on broadband, it turns out you can scan the internet very, very rapidly. So you can make pretty graphs like this, which you totally can't see because it's too dark. But basically, it's a really beautiful looking graph that you're going to miss out on. But it basically just shows the landscape of the entire world. And it's actually a full motion. He has got GIFs and stuff that show that turning on and off as it kind of traverses the entire day span, like machines turning on and off in different countries. So he's able to scan the entire internet literally in seconds, and he can do it basically all day long. So he can find everything coming up, turning off. So again, you thinking you have something on a high port, that doesn't work. But it gets worse. So Shodan, it's a really fun little tool. If you haven't played with it, you definitely should, especially if you're in AppSec. There's all kinds of cool research stuff you can do. So let's say you have a vulnerable service like PHP 5.3.3 that I want to go attack. Let's say I got a vulnerability in that. Remote command injection, as an example. In this particular example, it found 1.5 million targets that are potentially vulnerable that I could go take over. And effectively, I just need to pay, and all of a sudden, I get this huge dump of all these vulnerable servers, and I can go attack and create my own botnet, which I can use for this other attack stuff that I was talking about. You can use it to probe. So the reason why this is bad for two different reasons. One, it kind of articulates the whole store and then attack type mentality that we're moving towards. But also it shows that that minor information leak of that exported by rather, although it is a minor information leak, it actually can make a big difference. It suddenly puts you on the target list where you wouldn't have been in another case. Not that it's just, I mean, ultimately they could just attack the entire internet, and some people have done that. In fact, that's what they're kind of currently doing. But I think that will change very rapidly once people figure out how much more efficient they can be. And then it's all about saving money. So in my opinion, you should abandon the whole time-based obfuscation. So once upon a time, being on the internet, having a vulnerable service, it was like, okay, well, we're vulnerable to this exploit or something. We have time. Like people, you know, there's a great quote. It's like, the problem is you think you have time. You don't have time. Or very little time at that. And what's really happening here is that whole time-based obfuscation, like we have time to fix this vulnerability because no one's going to find us on the internet. That is not really a thing anymore, or at least it's going away very quickly. And maybe that's okay for the small-time attackers who don't really understand what's going on, but any of the more sophisticated adversaries are definitely moving in this direction. So let me give you an example. So we had this Ruby on Rails vulnerability, I think it was last year. And basically, you know, someone came out with it got put in a Metasploit, and then started being attacked. So here's a brief example of a timeline of one of our customers who had this issue. Over on this side is basically, on your left-hand side, is basically when this vulnerability came out, and then you can sort of see they found out about it, it got put in Metasploit, they patched it, they put an IDS rule in place to look for it, and then suddenly they were attacked, and that's the red boxes there that you see. So they were able to defend themselves, but just barely. I mean, really just by a day or so. So that bracket there, underneath it, is really what I'm talking about. That is shrinking very, very rapidly. The time it took for it to get into Metasploit and actually being attacked, in that case, was 1 day. I think that's really slow. Really, really slow. I mean, that sounds like really fast to you. I'm sure you're like, oh, God, I only have a day to patch. No, no, no. I think you have possibly seconds. Possibly seconds. So I think it's important for us to think like our adversaries. Instead of, I spend a lot of my time talking with adversaries. But we also have to think, you know, who could be our adversary? Maybe it's not just some random hacker trying to steal data from us. Maybe it's our competitors. Because some of the bad guys I'm talking to, they work for companies, or they are companies that are attempting to take over other companies or do bad things to them. Because from their perspective, from a monetary perspective, this all comes down to money, right? I mean, at the end of the day, everything's about money. What they really want is to remove you from the index in Google, if they can. If they can do that, then you're less likely to get clicked on, people aren't going to know about you, they're not going to write articles about you, therefore you're eventually going to go away, or they can hurt enough of your market share, and they get that market share, that they can make money. So this is a very brief list. I know it's going to seem long, but it's a brief list of some of the examples of the things that I'm starting to hear them talk about. This is the non-technical stuff. So this should scare the shit out of you, because basically anyone can do this. So ways that you can totally screw over your competitors. Some examples. You build a robot, tunnel it through Tor, and name it your competitor's bot. And basically you crawl the entire internet, and basically what happens is you get a whole bunch of phone calls saying, please stop scanning the internet, you're really annoying the crap out of us. And it wastes a ton of their time, and they don't have time to actually do real business. Send tons of spam, spoofed messages from your competitor's email accounts, and that creates this gigantic backslash, like, please stop fucking emailing me. It's terrible, I hate that stuff, and it wastes a bunch of their time. You sign them up for every type of spam email you can. In fact, I actually have a funny story about that. I used to use asdf@asdf.com as like a test email account. It turned out that poor guy who owned that email account was getting completely slammed by me. So he had to change his email account, which, sorry. So you sign the competitor's team's phone numbers up to every contact form ever, very similar attack. You sign the competitive team for every type of physical mail you can. This actually sucks a lot, because physical mail, if you get enough of it, you no longer can find the invoices buried in the mail. So you stop paying your bills because you just can't find them anymore. You know, when you get over 100,000 pieces of physical mail a day, you literally can't do anything other than deal with that mail. I mean, you're done. Or just don't deal with it at all and just leave your house like a hoarder full of mail, right? So you submit the resume of your competitors' top people to various job boards. This actually has occurred. This is actually a real attack. This is not a theoretical one. And so what happened is the HR team started emailing, it's like, are we cool? Like, are you going to leave us? And like, no, why? And so what ends up happening is, A, you waste a bunch of their time, but in a lot of internal conversations and hallway stuff, it's all a waste of time. And it also means that that person is much more likely to actually leave because people are going to call them and say, hey, I got this great job. So you're going to lose your best people. So you mail bomb the competitive team with a landslide of overly large emails, crash the mail server. Bonus points if you send it from their email account, so people say, please take me off your list or whatever, unsubscribe, and people start responding. It's awesome. So you can write to be forgotten all of their pages. This is definitely something they're already doing, by the way. And Write to be Forgotten is really a UK thing. It doesn't really work in the United States, but if it's an overseas international organization, that would be a good example. DMCA, some of their pages and domains. There's actually another version of this, which I just heard, one of the black hats I talked to just emailed me 2 days ago about this. And it was, you can basically sign people up and say they are not paying their Adobe licenses. They're basically using a bunch of hacked accounts for like Photoshop or something. And this organization will come down on like a ton of bricks on them and like do this huge internal investigation and totally wipe them out for months, which is pretty nasty. Autocomplete for the brand name, spam, and brand name fraud, brand name whatever. And so when people are typing it in on Google, they're like, oh, this is a fraud? Oh, maybe I shouldn't do business with them. And it just wastes a ton of time because they try to deal with that. Sign them up to RBL lists, so all their emails get blocked, so more waste of time, like, hey, did you get my email? It's like, Chris Nickerson said it the best I've ever heard, email is UDP. I mean, it's a one-way thing, you never know if it gets there. It's really obnoxious. You can add the word Unix box to all of their pages. It'll block all the Chinese users because China does not like Unix boxes. You get negative reviews about the company's senior management. That basically means that now they have to do all this brand reputation repairing stuff, and that's extremely expensive and also a huge waste of time. Right FUD articles. I know this seems like a lot of stuff, and I know it is, but this is, believe it or not, the short list. FUD articles, and basically more waste of time. It's all bullshit, and none of it's true, but it doesn't matter. Spoof email from the competitive exec team to the IT team asking all kinds of garbage stuff because, I mean, they're like, oh, am I hacked? And like, oh, you can't imagine the downstream shitstorm that would cause. Send a lot of friend requests to the exec team from hot single ladies, get them to dump all their information. When they finally do try to sleep with you, send that to email at which total shitstorm, that would totally light up a company. Send a flood of text messages to the IT, DevOps, marketing teams during product launches, like, oh, it's broken, blah, 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 and they're just running around like, oh. So they never know which ones are real, and they're just wasting tons of time, and they miss the good stuff. So I hope that's sort of demonstrative of some of the things. I mean, there should be a big old et cetera at the bottom of this. This is definitely by no means, no stretch, all the things you can do. And this is the non-technical stuff. There's all kinds of really gnarly, super technical stuff. That's an entire extra deck. I don't have time to go through it all. But this is, it turns out, much easier to do this kind of stuff than it is to do the hard technical stuff. So even though you're thinking, oh, I don't really care about this stuff, it doesn't matter. The adversaries are already starting to use this. So if you're working with companies who actually have real-world adversaries out there, this is the kind of attack that the bad guys actually can do. They know how to do this. Even these very unsophisticated, let's call them corporate bad guys, know how to do this stuff, or they can get imaginative to figure enough of it out to do it themselves. So sometimes I'm wrong, and I don't like being wrong, but I think it's useful to examine when you are wrong. In this particular case, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out why do bad guys like SQL injection? I just don't get it. I mean, I understand that it's a bad vulnerability. That I understand. I'm not that dumb. But I don't get why they like it better than command injection. It never really made sense to me. So I sat down and I talked to one of them, and I'm like, okay, tell me, give me the lowdown. Like, why or do you like SQL injection more? Like, let me give you an example. If I gave you SQL injection and I gave you command injection on the same box, And all you would get out of the SQL injection, nothing special. All you get is the data out of the database, and that is it. Imagine there's no way to pivot, there's nothing extra you can do. Let's say that's all locked down, you're ending up on a different machine, and that thing's totally locked down. Which would you prefer? He still said SQL injection. I'm like, why? I don't get it. Command injection, you get all kinds of stuff. You can pivot. You can attack the source code. You can change it if you want. You can add malware in. You can remove yourself from the logs. And on and on. There's all this great stuff you can do. SQL injection, you just get the data. You might be able to pivot. You might be able to get effectively command injection. But with command injection, you definitely get command injection. It just never made sense to me. And also, from syntax perspective, it just seems like a bigger pain in the ass, But it turns out it's actually not. It's much, much easier to do SQL injection. Because really, the only thing they do care about in this particular case is getting the data. Maybe they want to modify the data. In some cases, that is true. Like I've run into healthcare organizations where the adversaries want to modify data to change certain records so that certain things that are happening study-wise turn out to their advantage. But for the most part, they just want to steal the data. So when you get command injection and you land on a box, effectively what that does is it says, all right, you got a shell here, now what? Okay, all right, what kind of operating system am I on? Okay, you name -A, I'm on some Ubuntu version, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, where is Apache stored? Is this version 1 point something or 2 point something? It's like, oh, this is 2 point something, okay. Is it / etc / Apache? Like, you gotta find the directory, start moving around, like, okay, the database, is that a local database or is that remote? Like it's told through the source code, or maybe it's Java, you're like, I'm on Java, okay. Strings or something, and like it just turns out it's a bigger pain in the ass once you get command injection. I mean, you can do it, and any sophisticated adversary is going to go, of course you can do that. It's really simple, actually, but it takes so much more work to get the data, even though you have command injection, than just to get the data with SQL injection. So this is all like a trade-off, right? How much work are you willing to do as an adversary to pull that data out? And it turns out SQL injection is just far superior. So let's talk about things that are easy. So I'm a big Formula One fan. Yay, we have Coda here in Austin. So I'm not a huge Ferrari fan, but I respect them quite a bit. But I was watching TV the other day, and Steve Matchett, who's like one of the announcer guys, is talking about Formula One cars. Oh, by the way, this is not a sports analogy. This is an actual attack, so just bear with me for a second. So Steve Matchett was talking about, basically they don't do any of the strategy at the pit. They basically send everything over the wire to Maranello in Italy. And in Italy, they do all this analysis on the data, all the telemetry data, and then they send it back all the way to Austin, let's say, and tell the car, drive like this, right? And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, what? Are you doing what? You're sending it over the internet? Like, what are you talking about? You can't be sending like car telemetry over the internet. Are you insane? Have you seen the internet? Holy shit. So I started thinking about, like, what would I do if I were a competitive team? An example, Williams' team. The difference between third place and fourth place, which is where they are standing right now, is worth millions of dollars to them. So what would I do if I were Williams? Would I say, I should invest, let's say, $2 million to lock in that third place position? Or, let's say, do something else. What else could I do? Well, $2 million and I only make $2 million. That's a wash. But if I don't spend the $2 million, I lose $2 million. So that's bad, right? That seems bad. So even though it's a wash, it's just a wash. You know, it's like the better of two evils kind of thing. Or you could just launch a denial service, right? So Matt Johansson and Jeremiah Grossman, who work for me, or work for the same company rather, they don't work for me. Let's be very clear. Don't repeat that. I can just see that shitstorm. Anyway, so they came up with an attack basically where you can seed a little piece of JavaScript on ad networks and take out basically anything you want. So they tested this against Akamai, Akamai's homepage actually. And with Akamai's homepage, they were able to prove that with about $300, they could take down Akamai, right? The company that tons and tons of companies use for anti-denial service stuff, just because you can flood the network with that much traffic using ads. So, so what should you do if you're an adversary? Let's say I were Williams or a crazy Williams fan, where I don't have $2 million to spend on R&D, and even if I did, I'm not giving it to Williams. Would I prefer to do all that work, or maybe just spend $300 on some ads? right? It doesn't even have to be my credit card. I can use somebody else's. I'm good at that. So not only do I save the $2 million in R&D, but I also make $2 million in winning on the team, right? So from an adversarial perspective, it's much easier to do these low-hanging fruit type attacks. I know they seem less good than the right way to do it from the purely academic perspective, but it just turns out adversaries don't care. They just don't care. At least not the ones I talk to. They just don't care. So if you got to find evidence that these attacks are actually happening. One of the biggest problems I have with like the WAS threat classification, although very good, is that it doesn't really articulate how likely these vulnerabilities are to happen, or even if they are possible, or even if they ever have happened. Sure, academically, yes, I'm sure someone found it in a lab or created it or whatever. I'm sure if you do have access to source code in some very particular situations, yes, you can initiate those things. But in reality, I just don't see it. So when I talk to adversaries, I ask them questions like, have you ever seen this type of XPath injection ever used in the wild ever? Even anecdotally, even Kaiser Soze, you know, like, oh, I heard a spooky story once about XPath command, you know, like, no. The answer is no. Not even one time ever have these guys ever seen it or heard about it used in the wild, even amongst their own community. Not that it's not possible, maybe it has happened once. Maybe it's even happened 5 times, 100 times, or whatever, but not internet scale. Not the stuff that we should be caring about. Not saying you shouldn't do the research, I'm just saying it's not a real risk today. And likewise, other things like SQL injection are actually higher or actually worse than I thought. And you know, me being more or less an academic, I guess, in this context, I'm always shocked to find out I'm completely wrong about stuff. So it does happen. But one thing I really don't like, it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, is when people say like high, medium, and low severity. I've always disliked it. We've been stuck with it, and we're still kind of stuck with it, but I just don't like it because it doesn't really give context. If I say there's a high vulnerability on one site and a medium vulnerability on another site, which one do you go fix?
Depends on the site.
Right, it depends on the site. If one's internal underneath someone's desk with no sensitive information on it, and the other one's your corporate front end, which one do you go fix? Right, the one that it's actually going to get attacked, right? The one with actual sensitive information on it. So you're missing that context, and it's always bugged me because if you run a Nessus scan or whatever, it's going to say, this is high. You're like, I mean, without any context, maybe, but you know, it doesn't have any sensitive information on it. It's under someone's desk. It's, you know, and behind the corporate firewall. It's totally shunted off. It's in a lab, right? That's not a high. That's not even a low. It's nothing. I think it's important if we got to add context to what we're talking about. Keep the bad guy in mind. If you're not thinking about what the bad guys are actually going to do, you're going to miss a lot of stuff. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. So bear with me. I know graphs are a little funky, but so on the vertical axis is what you'd call the expected value of loss post-compromise. So let's say you had a vulnerability and you expected you would lose about $1 million if it were exploited. And let's say there's a 10% chance it's going to happen within the next 12 months. Let's call that $100,000 expected value of loss, right? And there's a bunch of other factors involved, right? Like the risk, how likely it is that Anonymous knows who you are, and whatever, right? And then on the horizontal scale there, you have the investment pre-compromise. How much does it cost to fix a vulnerability before the bad guys find out about it, before anything happens? If I want to fix this today, how much would it cost me, my corporation, to fix this vulnerability, right? Pretty straightforward. And then you plot your vulns. So this, just visually, you're already starting to get a little bit more context than you had before, right? This is a little bit more useful, but it's still missing something pretty important, which is, what do I give a shit about? Just because there is a vulnerability doesn't mean that I want to fix it. I know there's a lot of security purists out there that say, I want to fix every vulnerability. But that doesn't really make sense economically. There's all kinds of reasons that's true. And we do it all the time. I risk myself right now. Right now, I'm standing in front of you. Any one of you could shoot me. Right? You could kill me right now. I'm sitting on the stage. That is a real risk. It's not a very high risk. I've sort of risk rated it, right? It's not, I'm not going to take any defensive measures. I don't have any like plexiglass in front of us or whatever. So I've taken that risk. And we do that throughout life. There's all kinds of contexts where we do that. So what we need is something like a risk curve. So a curve might indicate, and it totally depends on the person, the situation, the company. There's all kinds of different ways you might want to calculate this. But a curve that kind of tilts away like this would be what we would call a risk-adverse curve. Somebody who really does not want to get exploited for whatever reason. They're very sensitive about it, or maybe their business model is sort of a tipping point. If it happens too often, people won't trust them or whatever, right? And the other one is a risk tolerant curve. This is a company, I like to pick on oil and gas a lot, like oil and gas, where they take a lot of risks because the reward is so high. They're making billions and billions of dollars. So you just sort of decide what type of risk profile you want. So let me give you an example of how you might calculate this. So let's say there's a vulnerability, and it'll cost you expected value of loss of $1,000. Let's say it costs $100 to fix. Would you fix the vuln? What? Yes, you would. Okay. Well, if you're the oil and gas, you'd say no. You know why? Do you have any idea how much money they make? Picking up the phone will not give them anywhere near what they would if they hung up the phone and started drilling. You know what I mean? There's no way they're going to recoup that cost, so they do not care. But a little mom and pop, a little grocery store or something, they might say $1,000 is all I'm going to make all day. That's 356 of or whatever of our annual budget. So it's definitely worth fixing, right? It's a solid investment. So the curve looks different. So you basically ask that question over and over at different sliding scales, and you can sort of plot what your curve would look like. Just kind of mental model here. It's obviously a lot more complicated than that, but you get the idea. And then you fix the vulnerabilities in the order from the upper left-hand corner down to the efficient frontier of the curve. And then you don't fix anything below that curve, and that makes people very uncomfortable. People don't like talking about not fixing vulns, and I'll tell you why you have to do it, but in a second. Anyway, you fix these vulnerabilities, and this is really cool because you can go talk to your CISO or your CFO even, which is even much more interesting, and you can say, instead of, there's 3 SQL injections, 2 command injections, there's a click jacking, and blah, 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 and this is what I'm going to click. And they're like, okay, sorry, can you stop clicking Klingon and give me some real information? I have no idea what you just said. So instead I can say, we have this amount of expected loss. Here's how much money I need so you don't have that loss. They're like, okay, money in equals money out. I get this. CFOs can talk that language. Dollar signs are what they talk. They don't know anything about our vulnerabilities. They don't really care about our vulnerabilities, but they do care about loss. And if they can look at a curve like this and they can argue with you and say, what is the math behind this? You can show them the math and they can argue and say, I don't like this piece of math. You can fix it, and then you have a meaningful conversation, as opposed to this one-way thing where I'm technical and you're not, and it never goes anywhere. So that works great until you don't know about the vuln. If you don't know about your vulnerabilities, how the hell can you plot them? So you can do sort of basic mental modeling, like we have 10% of our vulnerabilities that we don't know about, let's say, right? Whatever the number is. And they're approximately, let's say, this bad. You can sort of, diagram them out, what you think they might be in general, right? But they're still there. Like, what do you do about them? You can't fix them because you don't know where they are, right? So what you can do is you can do insurance modeling. You can put insurance in place to limit your liability to the point where it is below your risk tolerance curve. Now it's an expected value of loss of a known quantity. You know how much you're spending on insurance. You know what it's worth to you, you know what you're going to get out of it. So this is where things are going. You got to get on the train. If you're not already on the train, is everyone on the train? You on the train? Yeah, all right, good. You better get on the train because this is the way business is going. And I'm also a technologist, I promise. So let's talk a little bit about individual vulns. So this is why people don't like the idea about not fixing vulns. I will talk you through it because I agree, it's scary as crap. So first, let's say you plot a vuln, and let's say it's something that you're like, okay, yeah, this is something we definitely want to fix. This is bad. Command injection, homepage, it'll basically take us all out. This is the end of the world. This is the type of vuln we all talk about, right? Or SQL injection, sorry, my bad. So then you're like, okay, we'll outsource this to some third country or whatever, somewhere. We'll give it to some company that'll do it for us or whatever. They're way cheaper or whatever. But whoops, we didn't sign any SLAs. The SLAs, there is that vulnerability, but we forgot to say you had to fix the vulnerability. So now it's sort of like they're not incented to fix it. Like, what do they care, right? Not theirs. Is this going out? Yes. What's that? Hello. All right. About the same? Whoa, sounds a little louder. All right. So anyway, in that example where you don't have an SLA in place, the cost of remediation goes way up because now you got to like pay them to do something or like break your contract or whatever. There's all this funky stuff you have to do just to get that stupid vulnerability fixed, right? So let's say, as an example, that would push that way over, as an example. Then, let's say you're like, screw it, screw rigging this company, I hate this company, they're a real pain in the ass. I'm gonna stop clearing credit cards on that website. I'll do everything third party, so now the data is off of that thing, right? So we went from it being something that I would fix, but maybe not right away, to something, because I can't, because it's too expensive, to something I'm not even gonna bother fixing. At this point, there's no sensitive data on there anyway. I don't care, right? Whatever. It's, you know, from a liability perspective, it went down far enough. The expected value of loss is much, much lower now. Yeah, we maybe have some brand reputation issues if it ever were compromised, but it's not going to steal the money out of the database, right? Because there is no money in that database. Then, let's say you install a WAF in front of it. And then it's like, well, you know, the expected value of loss stayed the same, but now it's so much cheaper to fix this vuln. All I have to do is roll out a WAF rule. I mean, I do have to QA it and stuff, and you know, maybe not perfectly fixed, but it's close enough. Yeah, so it's barely worth fixing. It's not really a big deal anyway. So vulns have moved around over time, right? This is why continuous assessments are really important because you have to continue to look at what your risk profile is because it changes over time. And then Anonymous figures out who you are, right? And they decide, well, this is a target we're interested in, and brand reputation is like a guaranteed hit, and suddenly it's something you care about again. Is everyone with me? All right, so everyone still on the train? On the train? Yeah? Okay, good. I think it's important for us all to be on the train because this is the language of business. It's not like an if and this might happen or something. This is already happening. The instrumentation we need to create this stuff and doing insurance modeling is still infantile. I think it's got a long way to go before we're actually there and we can actually do this stuff. But this is where things are going. So, but the important part of the theme of this whole thing, if you weren't following it, did you just wake up from a coma? Awesome. If you weren't following it, the whole point of this is we have to be more aware of what the bad guys are actually doing. Just because we have found a vulnerability that we really like and it's something that we're interested in, just because I love command injection, oh, I love it so much, doesn't mean the bad guys like it. It doesn't mean they care. It doesn't mean they're going to exploit it as regularly as something else that may be less like amazing or whatever to you personally, or might show up as a medium instead of a high in your vulnerability scanner. You should not pay attention to that in a vacuum. You got to think about the bigger picture. Like, how does this work in the ecosystem? And I'm sure what'll end up happening over time is you'll have different data sources. Like Akamai is a great example of a data source. Like, they have all this WAF stuff coming in, threat information. But you also have underground channels. Like, people like, somebody started talking about our company. You know, you have different companies doing threat intel. That might feed into something like this. Or you might, your employees might say, hey, we're starting to hear when we go to conferences, people are talking about us in a negative way. Maybe that feeds into it, right? There's all kinds of sentiment analysis stuff on Twitter and Facebook. Like, all of that stuff might feed into this system that might design what you think your threat profile is from an external perspective. Also, how many people know that you even exist, how much traffic you get. All of those things over time might actually change it. It really depends. It depends on the company, depends on how much instrumentation you got in place, depends on what you can build with whatever budget you got. I'm not saying this is a completed science by any stretch. I think there's a long way to go, but I think this is definitely an area that we all need to start spending a lot more time in. Like even just sort of swagging it, you're gonna say, do you have a firewall, is not the right question to ask. It's just not the right question to ask. The questions they're asking are really terrible. If you want to look at probably the best document I've ever seen, not from an application security perspective at all, but from basically every other question you should ask, it's the BITS SIG. That used to stand for like the banking information security something or other, but now it doesn't stand for anything for some reason. Anyway, BITS self-assessment document. It's really, really amazingly good. It's like maybe like 100 pages of questions long. But it's terrible from an application security perspective. It only says OWASP top 10. And unfortunately, bad guys don't care about the OWASP top 10 as the sole way that they can take down a website. So, any other questions? Love you all. Bye-bye.